was the last time you were bothered? I'm not talking about the bothered where you're really upset that the guy in front of you was driving very slow this morning on your way to work, or that your teenage daughter left her half-eaten slice of pizza on her nightstand for 2 weeks, or that you washed your white shirt with your new blue jeans. I'm talking bothered by the fact that 1,600 children die a day from diseases directly linked to unsafe drinking water. Or that 13 million children are victims of human trafficking, some as young as 6 years old. Many of them die from neglect, torture, disease. Or children that have to walk to go to school miles and miles, hours. Or they have to pay to go to school in a country so poor that their parents make less money a day than any one of us pay for a cup of coffee. Does that bother you? I hope so. Because today, I want you to be inspired, but I want you to be bothered too. And actually, being bothered isn't even the hard part. It's staying bothered. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you to wallow in negativity and drown in all the atrocities that happen in our world every day. But I do want you to make a difficult choice to not put that out of your mind as you go along in your daily life, even though those atrocities are not staring you right in the face. You see, I believe that being bothered and staying bothered is the key to real long-term change. 13 years ago, when I moved to Singapore, I made lots of new friends that gave me this long list of things to do while I lived over there, places you should see, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. I took that advice to heart and I traveled many miles that first year. Then, in 2003, my best friend Virginia and I traveled to Cambodia. As soon as we landed in Siem Reap, it seemed different. It wasn't all the honking horns and the crowds of people that I was used to in other Asian cities. We got outside to go to our hotel. The streets were crowded, but it was with barefoot children and lots of bicycles. There were full families on motorbikes, little babies sitting on the handlebars. There were live pigs on the back of motorcycles, 2, 3, 4 at a time, that were dangling as they were driving down the road. There was poverty all in my face. But I was there as a tourist. I wanted to go see the magnificent temples of Angkor Wat. I was excited about that. I conveniently put those other things in the back of my mind. I was going to have a good time. The next morning, as I was standing on the back side of that incredible temple, I looked over the lush green lawns and I saw these monks, 4 or 5, walking in a row with these bright orange robes. And it was at that time, that moment, that a little girl came up to me and tugged at the back of my shirt. Now, kids have been asking me all morning to buy a scarf, buy a book, buy this, buy that. This little girl said, "Ma'am, can I have $1?" And I turned and looked at her. She was about 8 years old, little disheveled thing, so tiny and so dirty. I just stared at her and I said, "What do you want the $1 for? And what's your name?" She said, "My name's Srey Lynn, and I'd like to have the $1 to go to school." And her English was perfect. As I looked at her, looking into her eyes, I realized at that moment she was not asking me for $1. She was asking me for hope. And I said, "Srey Lynn, if you'll show me your school today, I'll give you that $1. Our guide, Samity, and I started walking out. We came to the gates. I started hounding him with questions. He had been so terrific at explaining all the significance of the individual temples with the carvings where everything. Well, now I wanted to know more. I wanted to know why this little girl was working at the temple, asking for money, and why she had to pay to go to school in a country like this. He stopped and looked at me and then told me the nightmare that his country had been through and about the killing fields of Cambodia. He told me about the Khmer Rouge and how they murdered more than 1 million Cambodians, professionals, doctors, lawyers, and almost all the teachers. He said almost everyone has a family member that's been killed. Everyone has a story. As we walked up to Srayland's school, she came running up to me and grabbed my hand and walked us over to the school building. I walked in this room, and my heart sank. There were about 75 kids all crammed in this small space, this building with dirt floors. There were holes all in the walls. You could see the dust in the air. All eyes were on us. The children sat there, and they were so remarkably well behaved, I could not believe it. They were waiting for their teacher. I thought to myself, I live 2 hours from here. My kids have everything they could possibly want or need. And these kids are sitting here waiting for a teacher to show up that would never come. This was not okay. It really bothered me. As we left, I told Samity, our guide, that I would be back. I promised him I would be back. It was as if everything shifted for me that day. It was gnawing at me, at the kids that I'd seen, that little Srayland. I could have gone back to my chaotic life. I could have been the good executive wife that I was, mother of 3, member of the PTA, gone on working out and having fun with friends. But I was too bothered to do just that. So when I did go back to Siem Reap, I went back with thousands of people like you from all over the world. And founding Caring for Cambodia, I realized that people really do want to help. Today, we have 21 schools, we've trained over 200 teachers, and we have 6,400 students. Our goal is for these kids to go to preschool, on through the 12th grade, and then graduate and become productive members of society. I have seen so many children's lives changed over the years. One little boy, David, in the first year, I was standing outside one of our schools and he was crawling down the dirt road. He wanted to come to the school, but he couldn't walk. He had club foot and he had some other medical issues, and we were there with a group of volunteers. One of our volunteers was an orthopedic surgeon. He got little David a pair of shoes. We enrolled him in school, and today he's in the 8th grade running and playing with his peers. Who knows? Maybe he could find the cure to dengue fever or malaria. Another little girl, it sticks in my mind. One of my trips, I had just landed. Our director, Savvy, called me, and he said, Jamie, I know this is a little bit off the beaten track, but there's a little girl that's really in distress, and I wonder if we can help her. I said, what's going on? She lived probably 100 miles away, and she heard of our CFC schools. Well, her mother was about to sell her to a brothel for $1,200. I said, Savvy, get that school. Let's find her a family. Let's make sure she's okay. We did find her a family. And the next morning, I met with that beautiful little girl. And she wanted to say thank you. Thank you for saving me. I was standing in that schoolyard more than a decade ago when I had my first orange moment. I coined being orange an expression to describe people who intuitively get what we're trying to do in Siem Reap. I have seen a person's inner light turn that bright orange of the monk's robes time and time again when they walk onto one of our campuses. They walk into a classroom, or they hold the hand of a young child. I had my orange moment that first day because I was bothered. And not only was I bothered, I stayed bothered. And I attribute the success of Caring for Cambodia to lots of things, but most importantly to the fact that we never stopped being bothered. You see, our volunteers come from all walks of life. We cover the entire political spectrum. We have the most conservative to the most liberal. We have devout Catholics, Jews, Muslims, and some fierce deniers of a higher power. We have grandparents, children, rich, people who live paycheck to paycheck, people that work full-time, and some that just give us an hour every now and again. The one thing they all have in common is not only were they bothered when they heard about Cambodia and wanted to do something, they've stayed bothered. Even after they go back to their everyday lives, as you go grocery shopping and visit with your friends and family, you don't let that fade. I don't know why people go back to their normal lives after doing something and they just forget. Why do they expect somebody else to tackle the problems? Are they too big? Is it too hard? Too overwhelming? Is it uncomfortable to feel bothered all the time? Well, I will tell you it certainly is uncomfortable. I feel so strongly about it being uncomfortable that it drives me to inspire others to want to do something. So strongly that I take my children with me to Siem Reap. I want them to be bothered by starving naked children. I want them to be bothered by smells that would make any one of us want to throw up, bothered by families that want to sell their children. Because that's what's going to inspire real change. Now, I don't want this to define us. I don't want being bothered to consume all of who we are. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, and I live a life full of joy. What bothers you? Hold on to that for a moment, because it's also about balance and choice. Every time I get on that airplane to leave Siem Reap, I sit in that seat and I say to myself, I can feel hopeless because of the sheer enormity of this task, or I can feel hopeful because I'm seeing change, and I know that we have changed the lives of thousands of children already. It's about being bothered, staying bothered, but then actually doing something. Take that moment when something bothers you. Hold on to it as you go back to your everyday lives. Don't let it fade. See what happens. You might be surprised. Perhaps I'm an ultimate optimist, but I make the choice every day to be hopeful, not hopeless, and to be bothered and stay bothered. Thank you.